Will.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of Bellbrook City Council. Tonight is Monday, August the 24th, 2020. If you could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To
To
the
the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Pam, could you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mr. Hoke,
Present.
Mr. Havens,
Here.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Here.
Mr. Greenwood,
Here.
Mr. Edwards,
Here.
Mayor Schweller.
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of August the 10th, 2020. Does any member of council have any changes or corrections to those minutes?
None, Mayor.
None
None,
there.
Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing none, the minutes are approved as submitted.
And
Mayor?
Mayor,
Yes,
can
please.
we excuse Dr. Van Veldhuizen?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. I forgot about that. Can we have a motion to excuse Dr. Dave?
I'll make a motion to excuse Dr. Dave.
In a second, please.
I'll second it.
Thank you.
A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to excuse Dr. Van Veldhuizen from tonight's meeting, and this was seconded by Mr. Greenwood. Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
I'm sorry, I had my computer on mute. What are we voting on?
to excuse Dr. Van Veldhuizen,
Oh, yes, of course.
and Mayor Schweller.
Yes. Thanks, Pam.
Mhm.
Mayor's announcements. I have nothing for this evening. We have no public hearing of ordinances, no introductions of ordinances, but we do have 5 resolutions. To start the night off, Deputy Mayor Edwards, Resolution 2020-S.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2020-S, a resolution authorizing an additional transfer of funds for 2020. Whereas the city of Bellbrook has adopted its annual budget and necessary transfers for 2020, and whereas the 2020 budget will require an additional transfer of money from the general fund to the capital improvement fund for the costs associated with the North Bellevue Culvert Replacement Project. And whereas the Ohio Revised Code Section 5705.14 requires transfers of funds to be approved by City Council. Now, therefore, the City of Bellbrook hereby resolves Section 1 that the transfer of funds may be made by the city manager as follows: from the general fund to the capital improvement fund in the amount of $347,600 for total transfers of $347,600. Section 2, the fund transfer shown as specific line items are hereby approved from and after the effective date of this resolution and may then be completed as determined by the city manager. Section 3, this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith. And I believe this represents the money that was granted to us from the state emergency fund, and it needs to get into the appropriate account. Is that the gist of it, Melissa?
Yeah, so basically when we did the supplemental appropriations ordinance the last 2 meetings, we had a transfer for $347,600, which is the amount on this resolution, going from the general fund into the capital improvement fund so that the actual improvement will be allocated towards the capital improvement fund where it should. So this just is moving that money in advance of us getting it back from the state. So yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any discussion amongst council? We have a motion for the adoption of ordinance 2020-S.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-S.
Thanks, Nick. In a second.
I'll second it.
I think I
Tie goes
heard-
to Forrest.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think I heard Mr. Greenwood. A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to adopt Resolution 2020-S, a resolution authorizing an additional transfer of funds for 2020. This was seconded by Mr. Greenwood. Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mr. Hope,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes,
Mayor Schweller.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Moving along, Resolution 2020-T. Councilman Greenwood.
Thank you, Mayor. Resolution number 2020-T. A resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a 3-year agreement between the city of Bellbrook and the police officers represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council Incorporated. Whereas the city met with the police officers represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council Incorporated, to review the terms of the labor management agreement covering wages, fringe benefits, and work rules. And whereas the parties agreed to terms for a 3-year contract starting August 1, 2020, and concluding July 31st, 2023. And whereas the city believes that this 3-year contract will allow for the continued provision of exceptional police service to the residents and is in the best financial interests of the city. Now therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that the city manager is hereby authorized to execute a 3-year agreement attached hereunto between the city and the police officers represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council Incorporated, with effective dates of 1 August 2020 and July 31st, 2023. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be in force forthwith. I read this thing 3 times, 3 different days. I think it's, you read it one time and you got some things that maybe you don't like or whatever, but you read into it and you read it again. And I honestly think it's a good contract. And I know Melissa worked real hard on this. And actually, I don't believe there's a whole lot of changes, and the increased compensation is fair. And Melissa, I'm sure you've got some comments.
So typically there's only one police contract, and this is the first year that there have actually been 2 separate contracts. And the reason behind that is just purely representation. The officers decided to solicit the help of a different union representative than the sergeants. And so since they were both represented separately, that required 2 different contracts. So some of the things that were brought up on one side, we tried to make sure those things were fair, but I just thought that it was worth noting that this is typically one contract, but it's actually 2 this cycle. So that just kind of complicated things a little bit because it was 2 different sets of negotiations, and it just took a lot more time. So we met with the sergeants and the officers 4 different meetings to kind of go over everything, all the proposals. And this should have been done several months ago, seeing as how the contract actually expired. Their current contract actually expired on July 30th, but with the pandemic and not being able to meet in public and bargain in public, we thought that it would be best to just extend the old contract until we could all get in the same room to be able to negotiate, which was beneficial. It's definitely preferred to be able to negotiate that way versus, over a format such as Zoom. So we did that. So that's just kind of the framework behind both of the resolutions that are on the agenda tonight. So this one is for the sergeants, and the let's see, is this the sergeants? No, this one's the police officers. So the police officers and sergeants both have the same wage increases. So it's a 3-year contract. They got 2% in year 1 and 2.5% year 2 and year 3. And the wage increase will cost $97,401 for the officers over the life of the contract, which is inclusive of overtime estimates, holiday pay, shift differential, and everything that goes into their wages, because they don't just get paid a straight 40 hours at a flat rate. So there's a lot that gets taken into consideration with that. So we do have 8 police officers. So that is one of the reasons why that number is a bit larger. But just to give everybody a little bit of perspective, the total full-time wage budget for our police department is just north of $900,000. So that is a very small percent over the total personnel wage budget that we have for our full-time officers. And the contract that is in front of council to approve tonight has a total of, I think it's 43 articles. It was 42 and we added one. So 43 articles, and of the 43 articles, there were 27 that were reviewed by management and the bargaining unit. Some of those they brought to the table and some of those we brought to the table. So the only ones that were financial in nature, of course, are wages, insurance, and then there was leaves of absence. So those were the 3. And insurance, we went over wages. Insurance, really the only thing that changed with insurance is that if anybody wishes to utilize the incentive, we would give each officer $10 a month to go towards gym membership to try to keep them in good physical condition. So that would be an incentive for anybody that wished to use it. So that's the long and the short of the officers contract. And the sergeants will have some pretty much very similar things once we get to that one next. So I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Melissa, relative to the 2.5% increases in the next 2 years, have we budgeted close to 6% or something like that as far as the all-in number? So we should be more than covered in our budget for at least this year and even the out years?
Yes, I typically budget 6% increases year over year for our wage and benefit costs, just because there's a lot of moving targets within that. So yes,
Right.
that's very conservative budgeting, and this is definitely going to be well within that.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments or discussion amongst council?
Just that it was pretty dry reading. I read through that contract.
That's why it took me 3 days.
And the other thing, keep in mind that we negotiated this without the help of outside counsel. When you look at the items that did change and looking at the marked up version that Melissa provided for the weekend, it seems that most of the items that were in discussion were more of a, I don't know, work type thing or behavioral type thing versus monetary. And we certainly didn't alter nor concede any of the management rights, which I think is the biggest piece we want to keep the way it is. And I think this has been the same contract for probably since we first negotiated, I believe. And we've just modified it each year, and each year it's been, or each cycle, it's been a handful of changes, very similar to what we did this year. Probably the biggest thing this year is the gym membership. But again, that's if they choose to use it and if they get the money, we reimburse them, and then they have to prove twice a year that they've actually gone to the gym. So it's a little bit of effort on their part as well.
It seemed pretty fair to me when I read through it all.
I would think that down the road, or maybe even other situations that we're in like this, since it has been so long since we've negotiated the original contract, we should likely have a legal review on it. Not to say that Melissa didn't do a great job here, just attorneys are basically do that for a living. I hear we have a good one, as far as that goes with regard to employment. So probably wouldn't be a bad idea on the next round to have it analyzed by an attorney and possibly consider that for future ones.
Melissa, why don't we just make a note in the file so we remember, because who knows who's going to be here the next time we negotiate this contract, but just put a note in the file that we've looked at this. That's probably a valid point. We've looked at it long enough, and maybe some of the language is a little bit archaic and we can change some things and pull some things out and go from there. But at least we're not spending that amount of money every 3 years, which I think the first time we did it, I think it was close to $20,000.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
Just
Yeah,
strictly the police
that's a
officers.
lot when we've already got a good contract in place.
Yeah, and we actually used an attorney. I think that was a relatively high-cost labor attorney at the time. But it seemed like we spent a fair amount of money for it, and since then, we've been able to sort of recoup that a little bit. Any more discussion amongst council?
I'd just like to make a comment that all through the contract, it mentions the chief and the city manager. They still have a decision-making process with a lot of issues that possibly could come up. So the way it's written, a lot of that possible problems can be done in-house, kind of the way I read the contract, which is good. And that's the way you want to do it, is try to keep things simple in-house and avoid the legal characters, as we just mentioned. So that's all I have.
That's a good point, because a lot of stuff in there does require the advance approval of the chief and the city manager. So we've kept a lot of the decision-making and calling the ball, so to speak, on some of those items in-house versus having to bring a third party in or bringing the FOP in. So that's kind of a nice win.
Yes.
Yeah, good point. Any more discussion?
None.
In that case, we have a motion regarding resolution 2020-T.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2020-T.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Elaine.
A motion was made by Mr. Greenwood to adopt resolution 2020-T, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a 3-year agreement between the city of Bellbrook and the police officers represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Inc. This was seconded by Mrs. Middlestetter. Mr. Greenwood,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes,
Mr. Hoke,
Yes.
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes, thank you. Next up on the agenda is resolution 2020-U. Councilman Hoke.
City of Bellbrook Resolution, excuse me, 2020-U. A resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a 3-year agreement between the city of Bellbrook and the police sergeants represented by Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Incorporated. Whereas the city met with the police sergeants represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Incorporated, to review the terms of the labor agreement covering wages, fringe benefits, and work rules. And whereas the parties agreed to terms for a 3-year contract starting August 1, 2020, and concluding July 31st, 2023. And whereas the city believes that this 3-year contract will allow for the continued provision of exceptional police services to the residents and is in the best financial interest of the city. Now, therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves Section 1, that the city manager is hereby authorized to execute a 3-year agreement attached hereto between the city and the police sergeants represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Incorporated, with effective dates of August 1, 2020 to July 31, 2023. Section 2, that this resolution shall take effect and be in force forthwith. And then the agreement is attached as well, 30 pages, similar format to the previous. And I don't have any questions. The only one note that I did want to mention, when we were going through discussions, there was some mention of physical fitness standard. And I just didn't see that included, so I didn't know what the status was of that.
So physical fitness standards are a very hard thing to get into a contract. So the gym membership was kind of a happy median, and it's a step in the right direction. So they're going full physical fitness standards is a very difficult thing to do. So this was a good first step, I felt like.
Okay. That was the only note that I had.
Okay. So with the sergeant's contract, again, it was 2% increase in year 1 and 2.5% in years 2 and 3. And that increase would cost $48,092 over the 3-year life of the contract. The sergeants had a total of 16 articles that were modified once finished, and they had 42 full articles in their contract. So again, the same wages, insurance, and they got the gym membership in with that insurance piece of it too. So theirs was a bit simpler than the officers, just because the representatives negotiating for the officers were newer to the process. And so they took a look at a few more articles than what the sergeants did, who have been negotiating contracts for as long as we've had one. It's been the same representative on behalf of them. So that is the long and the short of the police sergeants.
Unless any major changes or differences between the two of them, I know that we took out officers and sergeants at a whole bunch of places. And other than that, I didn't see a whole lot of differences other than just terminology. And
yeah, there was the only real difference is vacation accrual. The way that it had always been here is nobody, this was even in our personnel policy manual. So the personnel policy manual and the union contracts for everybody that are bargaining unit members, police and fire, nobody is awarded vacation until they've worked here for an entire year. And so you get a one-time dump on January 1st of each year of your vacation. And so I have worked to try to change that to an accrual-based method. So you start earning vacation much like you earn sick leave from the onset or your start date. And then you have at least a little bit of vacation to use up until you've met your year, and then you have that full year's worth there. So I just felt like to expect somebody to come to work here and then not utilize vacation for a year was a little unfair. So that was one of the big changes, because the sergeants didn't want to do it. So everybody else in the entire city is going to be on an accrual based method for their vacation earning, but the sergeants. So it was odd that they were not interested in that. So that's one of the big differences, which I think is interesting, that wasn't something that they wanted to entertain. So that's one of the big differences at the forefront for me. It's just their vacation is going to be figured differently.
probably it's something we need to get in place to make sure we can bring in experienced people. People with a lot of experience aren't going to necessarily take a job. We found that at our firm, that they're not going to take a job with a week's vacation or 0 vacation for 12 months when they had a vacation before for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So
Yeah, that's really odd to not want to have vacation from the get-go.
And the police officers are much more benefited from that, because anytime we bring in an entry-level police officer, a brand new police officer, they're coming from somewhere else. Our police sergeants, they've worked here for a long time. They're tenured. So it didn't really matter as much to them. So it really benefits the ranks that are bringing in the newer people. So police officers were definitely interested in that. So that's the one big difference, really.
So if
Okay.
it wasn't a detriment to them, why did they object to it?
I don't know what the reasoning was. I thought it was a good idea.
I'd have to agree.
Probably makes it less interesting for an outsider to come in to be a sergeant in Bellbrook.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I
a lot
guess
to do.
it also makes it more appealing for us to promote from within, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay, any more discussion on 2020-U? We have a motion regarding resolution 2020-U.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-U.
Thank you, TJ. And a second?
Okay, I'll second this one too.
Thank you, Elaine.
A motion was made by Mr. Hope to adopt Resolution 2020-U, a resolution authorizing the city manager to execute a 3-year agreement between the city of Bellbrook and the sergeants represented by the Fraternal Order of Police, Ohio Labor Council, Inc. So seconded by Mrs. Middlestetter. Mr. Hope,
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter,
Yes,
Mr. Havens,
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood,
yes,
Mr. Edwards,
Yes.
Mayor Schwaller.
Yes, thank you. Next on the agenda is resolution 2020-V. Councilman Havens.
Thank you, Mayor. A resolution to make a recommendation to the Court of Common Pleas for the appointment of incoming Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District Commissioner. Whereas the city of Bellbrook, Sugar Creek Township, and the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District entered into a memorandum of understanding, MOU, in May of 2020, providing clear guidelines for the appointment of members to the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District Board of Commissioners, beginning with the 2020 appointment and each year thereafter. And whereas due to the COVID-19 epidemic, the Court of Common Pleas for Greene County delayed the appointment of this year's commissioner until September 30th, 2020. And whereas in accordance with the terms of the MOU, the parties advertised for interested candidates and received 9 candidates for the court-appointed position. And whereas also in accordance with the terms of the MOU, representatives from each of the jurisdictions participated in the interviews of the candidates on August 11th through August 13th, 2020. And whereas at the conclusion of the interviews, the members present from the parties concluded that Mr. Mike Johnson was the best candidate to endorse for consideration of the court to appoint to the incoming term of commissioner for Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District. Now therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, that City Council for City of Bellbrook does hereby concur with the consensus of the interviewing parties and recommends to the Court of Common Pleas for Greene County to appoint Mr. Mike Johnson to the incoming term of Commissioner for Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District with an appointment date of September 30th, 2020. Section 2, that the city manager is hereby directed to provide a copy of this resolution to the Sugar Creek Township, the Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District, and the Court of Common Pleas for Greene County. Section 3, that this resolution shall take effect and be in force forthwith. I participated in these interviews with Melissa. We had a lot of great candidates with a lot of positive things to bring to the table. I think that there's for the candidates that weren't selected, I definitely would encourage them to continue to stay involved with the community, and it's not the end of an opportunity to serve the city. It's just Mike Johnson really excelled at the interview and was a clear choice by all the parties.
Hey, Ernie, could you give us a little background or thumbnail sketch of Mike Johnson's credentials at all, or? I don't know if you have that in front of you or not. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but.
Mike, basically from a credential standpoint, he's a resident of the city. Outside of that, all of, as far as adequate credentials for the position, they all had adequate credentials. It was just clear that, in my opinion, as I interviewed him, that the motives were very pure on Mike's behalf. He has a passion for serving the community. He has the capacity to, and it was a nice balance of really wanting to serve the community, not having an agenda behind the reasoning for him applying for the position. Specifically, what we were losing with the previous commissioner was a strong connection with athletics, and he certainly brought that forward. He definitely has connections and with some athletics, and certainly has interest in serving all the athletic side of the community, not just one sport.
Okay. Sounds like a good guy.
Melissa, did you have anything to add? You were in all those interviews as well.
I'll just say that it was impressive. 9 people, all impressive. They were all great. It was really hard. Every person that kept coming in just made it even that much tougher to decide, but it was really good. It was really good. So I think that Mike is going to do a really great job, and it's going to be really exciting to just see what can be accomplished in this next chapter for the Parks District, and Bellbrook represented, which is awesome.
Very, very good. It sounds like a busy couple of days interviewing 9 people over 3 days. It was a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday combination. So those are all, I presume, evening interviews. Thanks for the efforts.
Oh, they were actually during the day interviews.
Oh, really? Even better, maybe. Okay. Any more discussion amongst council of our newest recommendation to the Court of Common Pleas?
I'd like to thank Ernie and Melissa for doing that hard work.
Yeah. Ditto that. Any more discussion? We have a motion with regards to resolution 2020-V.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution 2020-V.
Thank you. And a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Nick.
A motion was made by Mr. Havens to adopt resolution 2020-V, a resolution to make a recommendation to the Court of Common Pleas for the appointment of incoming Bellbrook Sugar Creek Park District Commissioner. This was seconded by Mr. Edwards. Mr. Havens.
Yes.
Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Hoke.
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood.
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter.
Yes,
Mayor Schweller.
Yes, thank you. Next up on the agenda is resolution 2020-W. And this was assigned to Councilman Van Veldhuizen, who is not with us this evening.
Yeah, Elaine, would you be able to read it? It seems everyone else has read. It's
We'll
short.
solicit volunteers.
It's short, or volunteers. Yes, it's short.
I can read it.
Thank you, Nick.
All right, Nick, thanks.
Resolution number 2020-W, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. Whereas the city manager, under guidance from the county auditor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, submitted the information necessary to determine resources needed for the next succeeding fiscal year commencing January 1st, 2021. And whereas the Budget Commission of Greene County, Ohio has certified its action thereon to this council, together with an estimate by the county auditor of the rate of each tax necessary to be levied by this council, and what part therefore thereof is without, and what part within the 10 mil tax limitation. Sorry. Now, therefore, the city of Bellbrook hereby resolves, Section 1, the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and its certification be and the same are hereby accepted. Section 2, that there be and is hereby levied on the tax duplicate of the said city of the rate of each tax necessary to be levied within and without the 10 mil limitation as attached hereto. Section 3, that the clerk of this council be and she is hereby directed to certify a copy of this resolution to the county auditor of the said county. Section 4, that this resolution shall take effect and be enforced forthwith. And attached is the actual filing certificate that gets filed with the county auditor. Melissa, do you have anything to add?
So this is something that we do every year, with the exception of one step, which typically a tax budget comes by way of resolution to council in July. And that was not a requirement for this year because of the pandemic. So what I had to do was just give an estimate of where I think we're going to end 2020 and begin 2021. And I just gave those figures to the county, and then they sent this back for council to certify by resolution, which is what we're doing tonight. So it's usually a two-step process, but they modified step 1 so that it did not have to come before council and be approved in that way. I just had to give them figures in which they pretty much what the tax budget is used for is our estimated resources for 2021. We show them that we need the taxes that we receive and how we spend them. And they say, okay, you are worthy of receiving those taxes, so we will give them to you. And this is our document that says that we will commit those funds to you for the next year. So it's just an estimate, and it's just something that we use to help budget for the following year. So usually a two-step process, but this year it was just a one-step process.
Any more discussion amongst council on resolution 2020-W?
No.
Again, this is a recurring item that the COVID has relaxed our reporting somewhat. So we're thankful for that.
Seems to make more sense anyway.
Yeah, really. We have a motion regarding resolution 2020-W.
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2020-W.
Thank you, Nick. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you.
A motion was made by Mr. Edwards to adopt resolution 2020-W, a resolution accepting the amounts and rates as determined by the Budget Commission and authorizing the necessary tax levies and certifying them to the county auditor. This was seconded by Mr. Havens. Mr. Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Havens.
Yes.
Mr. Hoke.
Yes.
Mr. Greenwood.
Yes.
Mrs. Middlestetter.
Yes.
Mayor Schweller.
Yes. Thank you. That brings us to the conclusion of our resolutions, and now we have a city manager report.
Okay, so we have a big announcement included in the city manager report, and there's also a letter attached addressing the mayor and council. Our fire chief, Jim Neidhart, is going to be retiring, and he has plans to retire this year, December 31st, 2020. So attached is a letter, like I said, that he had addressed to council, just kind of outlining some thoughts, and it's just really sad. I'm not looking forward to this at all. So he's been with the city for the last 6 years, and he's done an excellent job, and he's been a great leader to the fire department, and he's just going to be sorely missed. So I know that he has had a long career in fire service, and this is well deserved, even though it's bittersweet. So I am wishing Jim all the best, and there will be more information forthcoming about, hopefully we can celebrate him. I don't know what that's going to look like, just because it's just hard to plan anything, but I'm hoping that that will include us being able to get together and be able to honor him at some point in the near future. So just stay tuned for that. The 2020 paving was completed last week. The weather was really cooperative, and they were able to get in and get out, which was great. So that is done. The North Bellevue Drive culvert project work officially began the week of the 10th, which was the last time that we met, and they are just plugging along. So that is finally started, thank goodness. We have an Eagle Scout project that is about to begin. Hopeful Eagle Scout Sam Reynolds is working on a project to build and install a concrete pad and a bench next to the little free library up at Fire Station 2. So that will be a welcome addition to the little free library that's up there. So that's pretty cool. So keep an eye out for a lot of work being done and a new bench being installed. The Northwest Street Sidewalk Project, which is a community development block grant through Greene County, should be starting very soon. That project was awarded to a contractor, and it came in under budget, which is great. So we thought that our share was going to be about $46,000, and it's actually only going to be $19,000. So that's great. And $35,000 is being put in by the block grant that we got. So that's great. And the 2020 budget schedule is going to be here very soon. So I went ahead and put that schedule in my update. Our first work session will be on October 26th, and we'll start with administration and service departments. So we will do 2 work sessions, and then we will have an introduction of the ordinance on November 23rd, and then December 14th, we'll do our public hearing, because typically our second meeting in December doesn't happen just because it's usually right up against Christmas. So that is in the packet, just so that everybody has that on their radar. And that's it for me.
Lisa, thanks for identifying and pointing out the 2020 budget schedule. It's kind of hard to believe that it's going to be here before you know it. So it's a pretty big undertaking. So we look forward to that.
Feels like we just did that.
We did. Does anyone have any questions of the city manager? See none, let's move on. We have no old business before us. We have no new business, but we do have committee reports. And tonight, let's start off with service.
Thank you, Mayor. Service department, you know, it's like the rest of the city is kind of working under the COVID setup, social distancing and trying to stay safe. And so they're doing as much as they can under those conditions. Melissa brought up the paving program's complete, which I think there's still some striping left. Melissa, is that true? Stripe the new paving, that's in the works. And I think, wasn't that under budget somewhat? The paving came in a little bit cheaper, but on the other hand, I guess the striping is a little higher, but I think it's going to work out. So our making the decision to go ahead and pave those extra streets, I think worked out. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Thanks, Forrest. Safety, Councilman Hoke.
Yeah, I had some coordination with both chiefs, just to report on the fire. side, they have reported they are seeing normal numbers according to calls based on what they would typically see. So I think some of the COVID-19 effects are flattening out. But specifically with regarding to COVID, they just wanted to report that within the firehouse, they are taking every effort to take precautions for COVID-19. They are wearing masks internal within the house when social distancing is not possible. Other than that, we have nothing else to report from a safety standpoint.
Thank you, Mr. Oak. Finance and Audit, Councilman Deputy Mayor Edwards.
Nothing tonight for Finance and Audit, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. In Community Affairs, Councilwoman Middlestetter.
Nothing officially from Community Affairs, but I would like to, whether this is appropriate here or in open discussion, I learned yesterday that John Lensidel, I forget his name, the artist, has purchased the Countryside shopping center where Subway is, and is turning those offices that are at the lower level behind that building into artist studios, as they are trying to, he and Greg Dart are trying to establish an artist community as a draw for Bellbrook, with the photography studio and the fine arts gallery, very visible. This is, I'm looking forward to seeing the Subway Plaza, which that's not its official name, but we all know Subway. That looks like it may be spruced up a bit and be put to good use. So I just learned that yesterday on a walkabout in town. So, and I'd like to also remind folks that the museum is still open on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So come down and see what the history is of your hometown. That we have a lot of really lovely exhibits down there, and it's not real crowded right now. So come and enjoy it. Take advantage of one of the best benefits that we have in town.
Thank you, Elaine. Pam, we have the clerk's update. Did you want to highlight any of the items that are listed in here, or these are just for us to pay attention, look forward to, or?
I have to unmute. So yeah, I was just going to mention, they are listed there, just things to make sure everybody realizes we haven't forgotten about these things. These are going to be upcoming items. Future agenda items will include, in September, we'll be giving out the 2020 Beautification Awards. The Beautification Committee met, toured all around town, made their decisions for the year. So we'll have a presentation with pictures of all the winning properties, and then they'll receive their awards, which is an engraved stone. The stones are engraved by the high schoolers. So as soon as the stones are done, we will schedule that, but that should be happening in September, just so you know. And then, so looks like at some point we need to schedule a work session for the discussion on a Community Improvement Corporation, which is a CIC, and possibilities for that for the city. Also, a proposal to look at the fire station consolidation. There's quite a few legislative items on our list there that'll be coming very soon. Most of those have already been looked at by the attorney and will be ready to go and move forward on those. So those will be coming. If notice anything that we've forgotten over time, let me know if anything has dropped off the radar that we want to make sure gets back on. So it's just a little heads up. Also, I don't know when y'all want to talk about in-person meetings starting up again. We're taking precautions here in the building. during work hours. And so that's something to kind of think about for future. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Pam. Next up is open discussion. You want to start with Councilman Havens?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd first off like to thank Melissa and Doug for their extreme efforts in the negotiation of 2 police contracts. Those things were quite lengthy and like Mrs. Middlestetter said, tedious to read. Glad we've got through those. Also, I'm looking at the list that Pam provided. It shows a lot coming, and it gives us some insight to what's going on behind the scenes within the city staff. I really just want to extend a big thank you to Pam, Melissa, Michaela, and Jessica for all their efforts, and I'm really looking forward to working through these next agenda items that was on Pam's list. A lot of exciting things coming up, and I'm looking forward to it. That's all I've got.
Thank you, Ernie. Councilman Hoke.
Yeah, I just wanted to inform council in the planning board, there was a discussion about the installation of electric charging stations for electric vehicles. They discussed, or they brought up the potential of installing the station at Winters Library. There's a caveat that it has to be installed on public property or at a place of business that the business owner wants it to be installed. There was some discussion about the it can charge all types of electric plugs. It is self-funded to install these. I don't exactly know the details of the funding mechanism about how the billing is taken care of, whether it goes through Vectren or DP&L, or if it's privately owned and they pay for the electric and then there's a surcharge. I don't know. But I also was curious about, how does gas tax work? I'm completely naive there with regard to electric that's used for vehicles. So I don't know if there's anything there. Let's see what else. That is it with regard to the electric charging station. Did anyone have any questions about that or comment?
The charging stations was, as far as I know, going to be funded by Miami Valley Regional Planning on a grant.
Mhm.
And I think it was up to $7,500 if I remember right. And they want, you said it right about public spaces or access to the public. And I think the library it's a good spot. My thoughts are the plaza's close by. It will help business. It's just a small piece, but it will help. Somebody has an electric car. They may want to stop in, charge it, and go get an ice cream. That's just one of those little pieces that help things work. And I'm not sure if there's a certain amount or how many we can actually use that grant for. And the other question you had, TJ, was, is there a meter? Is it like a parking meter you stick quarters in? I don't know. Maybe Melissa might know.
So there's a number of different ways that you can handle that. My previous position in Yellow Springs, they had their own electric utility and they had 3 or 4 of them parked at their municipal building spaces that had those. And so they just gave out the electricity because it was nominal. It was like $6 a month per charging station. So the village just ate that cost. But I know that they had some issues because they had some people that were kind of abusing it. So they I know we're looking at ways to kind of deter that. So you can install something on it that you can pay right there for your electricity, flat rate. So it could be a source of revenue because, you know, if you charge, I don't know what the appropriate amount would be, but if you would charge $5 for a charge, you know, that electricity might only cost 50 cents or so. So I don't know those exact figures, but you can do it either way. You can either, you know, absorb that charge, or you can pass it along and install something that will accept payments there at the point.
Okay. Would that be something, once a plan is put forward, is that something they would bring to council, or do they solicit input from the community as to where it would be located?
Well, I think that is on us right now. We had to give them a couple of different site ideas, and, you know, with it being on public land, we're just kind of limited in places that would make sense. So the library or our building would be the two obvious choices. So I know that we had to provide GPS coordinates of the locations that we were considering, and they're actually going to do a site visit, MVRPC would. So they would come out and they would take a look and they would determine if the sites that we had picked out would be a good site to be able to install one. But you do have the option to install more than one, but I think that is at your cost. But I think that possibly you might get a break on the actual chargers just because there's going to be so many of them purchased with this project.
Melissa, is September 30th, I think, is that the date we have to have all this put in place?
That sounds right. It's coming up. Yes.
It makes sense to me if you can put it in a business location where the owner is agreeable, that the gas station, because that's where people go to get fuel for their vehicles. And there's lots of space to park and plug in there. So that might be an option to look at. I don't know if it'd be agreeable, but it makes sense to me.
We talked to the actual business owners throughout town and see if they want to take advantage of the opportunity to have one of these and pay for the extra ones. Is that something we could do?
I don't know if that's possible or not. I'd have to look at that. With them only looking at public property, it makes me think that answer would be no.
So they're only looking at public properties?
You can only put them on public property, yes.
Oh, I thought I heard, or a business property who agreed.
Yeah, I thought so too. Sorry.
No.
They said in planning board, and I didn't see anything in writing, that should the business owner propose it, it would be acceptable, but I don't know all the details. There might be caveats, different costs. I don't know.
I think the business discussion part of that was that businesses can purchase their own and put them in if that's something they want to do for their clientele or something. But the program that planning board was talking about specifically is for public spaces.
Okay, so I'll choose that idea then.
Okay. The only other topic I wanted to mention was I got an invite. I don't know. I saw Elaine, your name was on the email for a smart housing policy forum on 23 October. And I think the governor is speaking at that. It's an online forum. I don't have any more details of that, but that's just with regard to establishing more affordable housing in the, I think, the 100 to 250K price range.
Good luck in this area with land costs.
Yeah. And then just one final question that I wanted to bring up. I know in previous meetings, they talked about something about the bump outs on the curbs at Franklin and Main. I see Elaine smiling. Is that something?
Some history on that. I'll have to tell you sometime.
Okay. Was that an actual topic for discussion or was that just a question?
Oh, that came up years ago, and the ins and outs of it make a funny story.
Okay,
There's been a lot of work in those bump outs, trust me.
okay,
And those are not the original planned bump outs. Those have been modified subsequent to the original installation.
okay. I'll leave it at that for this moment.
Okay, good.
Probably a good idea.
Okay,
Anything else, TJ?
that is it.
All right, thanks.
Yep.
Councilwoman Middlestetter.
I think I've said enough for tonight.
Okay, thank you, Elaine. Councilman Greenwood.
Thank you, Mayor. I just got a few comments. I'd like to thank the previous council members now for supporting the police department with the contract. This contract and their pay and benefits affect their families and our surrounding communities as we have use each other's services at times. And I would like to thank Melissa for putting some family things in there for paternity leave, which is, we don't have too many babies born in the police department, but at least she inserted some of those family issues in there. And thanks, Melissa. And so I think you can't say that Bellbrook doesn't support the police because we've kind of got a history of doing that. So thanks.
Thank you, Forrest.
I have.
Deputy Mayor Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to congratulate Chief Neidhart on his impending retirement. He's been a pleasure to work with. I think he's done a great job with our fire department, and I wish him well. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I really have nothing tonight other than to echo Councilman or Deputy Mayor Edwards' comments about Chief Neidhart. I think he's done a great job for the department. He came in at a time that we had to look outside to bring someone in. I think he's been a great fit for the department, has a lot of experience and brought a lot of value. So let's make sure we're able to remember him and celebrate his retirement appropriately, hopefully in a post-COVID world. So, Pam, is there anyone in the viewing audience with comments for this evening?
We have a couple of people there, but nobody has raised their hand that they want to actually speak. So I think we're good.
Okay. Does any member of council have any additional business to bring before us this evening?
None, Mayor.
Done, Mayor.
Seeing none, I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Night.
Good night.